Paid for by Save Juneau, P.O. Box 32142 Juneau, Alaska 99803 Molly Duval Chair. Top contributors Wayne Coogan, James Wilcox, and Robert Jacobson.
Hello, everyone. This is Alex Sargent with Do You Know Juneau, and we are speaking with Christine Woll. Welcome, Christine.
Thanks for having me.
So we're going to get started. Tell us a little bit about yourself and what qualifies you to represent us on the Assembly.
Sure. So I moved to Alaska, it was 2009, originally to get my master's degree in fisheries up at UAF. So spent some time up in Fairbanks, out in Western Alaska as well. Made my way to Juneau for a job, 2012. And pretty quickly figured out that Juneau was the place that I wanted to make my home. So now I've been here about 11, 12 years. Soon after kind of deciding Juneau was the place for me, I was like, how do I get more involved in my community? I actually asked somebody who was running for assembly at the time that question, and they said, join a board or commission. And so I went on city website, looked at the boards and commissions that they had, and I ended up joining the Juneau Commission on Sustainability. I really liked that. I joined another city board. I ended up chairing the Blueprint Downtown steering committee, which did some like downtown planning work. And so my interest in serving the community through local government just kind of grew over time, and ran for assembly in 2020, kind of during the pandemic. It was kind of a very tangible way to have impact in the community. But so I'm in my first term right now, and it's been truly rewarding in terms of ability to have impact in Juneau. I'm really impressed with kind of the way local government touches everybody's lives. We're dealing with tourism, we're dealing with childcare, we're dealing with housing. And so definitely big challenges that are not easy to solve. But I've seen us make progress, and I know there's a lot of work to do. In terms of my skills, so I'm running for re-election in District 2. In terms of the skills that I bring, I think, I've served on the assembly for 3 years. And to be honest, like the first year, it's like figuring out how the government works. Second year, you can like see all the problems that are happening. And I feel like by the third year, you start figuring out, okay, here are the levers that we can pull to actually make some change. And so I feel like that's an experience that I bring kind of already going through that process. And then the other thing that I think I'm good at is, in this time, politically polarized time in our community, in our country, I think I'm a bridge builder. I think I work well with people who don't necessarily see eye to eye with me. And I help other people who maybe don't agree kind of come together and see a goal. And so I think that's important on the assembly, to work with other assembly members. It's important to work with other community members. And so I think those skills are really kind of why I'm qualified.
Thank you for that. And we're going to actually move into the questions. So clearly, we all love living in Juneau, but it's expensive. Save Juneau is very concerned about the cost of living. What is one idea the Assembly could implement to lower Juneau's cost of living?
Yeah. So I think, the Assembly's number one priority has been housing. And I think that is critical. We are in a crisis right now. There's not enough housings, no matter, how much money you make. There just isn't that many places to live. And so I think that anyone who's running for assembly or on the assembly, the number one goal should be figure out how we can build more housing. And I know you asked for one thing, but I think we got to do a few different things. Like if we only attempt one thing, we won't be very successful. And what I would say is, developers, a lot of times the most cost-effective thing for them to develop are single-family homes. And so we need to provide financial incentives for homeowners, for developers to build more units on their lots. I think there's more city land we can open up. We're working on the second crossing, which I think will be important to open up the backside of Douglas. We have other city property that I think could be developed for housing, places like Telephone Hill, Peterson Hill. And then our code and our zoning is pretty bad actually for like incentivizing high density housing. And so we kind of need to scrap some of that and start again so that people, I know somebody who wants to put a tiny home on their property to have other people live there, and they're not allowed to under our current code. So a lot of work needs to be done there.
So at both the state and city level, as well as the private sector, there are tons of vacant open positions in Juneau's workforce. Why can't Juneau attract more people to live and work here?
Yeah, good question. I definitely think housing is one of the big barriers. So
everyone says it.
Yeah, I know people. I know people who have hired great people who want to come to Juneau, like despite the weather, despite the size, want to come to Juneau, but they can't find a place to live that they can afford. So all of those strategies I just talked about housing definitely will help. But, I think vacancy rates in our city specifically are definitely something on my mind. I'm sure you've heard about what's happening in the police department. Like we have tons of vacancies that are just really unacceptable. Those folks are working way too hard because they have to show up to the job no matter what. I think wages haven't kept up with inflation. I don't think we knew how sticky inflation was going to be. And so I think we have some right sizing to do to make sure we're competitive, not just within Juneau, but with other communities. Yeah, and I think making CVJ a good place to work. We just passed paid parental leave for our employees so that young families can take paid time off if they're an employer in the city. I think that will help recruit some folks. Matching support for childcare. So there's little things that I think just make employees feel more valued. And, if CVJ can do it, maybe we can be a leader for other employers in the community to help attract more people.
So we're going to move into actually being an assembly member, which you are at this time. So how do you see the roles of the assembly member and the city manager, which is hired by the assembly?
Yeah, good question. In my day job, I actually do a lot of work with nonprofits on kind of understanding roles and responsibilities of a nonprofit board versus an executive director. And so it's very similar that, the responsibilities of the assembly are to set policy direction and to approve a budget and to hire a city manager and a city city attorney. And so to me, that means that we are making the hard calls about what the priorities are for the community. And, we're elected. The community decides what they want. They elect the people that are going to represent them. And we say, hey, these are the things that are top priorities to spend money on, to work on. And then it's the manager's job to make that happen. I appreciate we have staff that have creative ideas. They'll bring us their recommendations. Sometimes we'll agree with those. Sometimes we won't. Sometimes they'll say, we're not going to give you a recommendation because this is a policy call. And so I think it's always a back and forth for that relationship. But at the end of the day, we're in charge of priorities.
How would your decision be affected by public opinion, testimony, in-person, email, versus the using your knowledge and judgments you have gained on issues?
Oh my God, such a good question. I think one of my steepest learning curve joining the assembly. I think it's easy, as a kind of logic brain person that I'll read something and I'll be like, here's what I think. And so I think that's kind of how I started as an assembly member. And then I have learned over time that that's a skill set that I bring. But the most important thing for me to be doing is helping the community feel trust in local government. And that means listening to them in as many ways as I can and making government more accessible for people, right? I feel like people show up and testify, which is wonderful. But for every person who shows up and testifies, there's like tons of people who don't even know how to do that. And so I'd love to kind of put some more thought into how we make sure people feel heard in a way that's maybe a bit more modern than, we've kind of been running meetings the same way that we have for whatever 60 years. And so I think that could probably be radically reimagined to be more accessible to people.
So we're going to move on to the ballot measure, the one and only infamous hot topic. Do you support public servants promoting the city hall with public money? And then secondly, do you have alternative options to solve the public building we have today?
Yeah, good question. So, I do support a city hall. I voted to put it on the ballot, and I will be voting yes, because it just makes financial sense. When our building is in terrible shape. We're renting in lots of different places, and so it doesn't make a lot of sense to kind of invest in our terrible building that isn't even holding our people and then paying a bunch of rent. So like in the long term, it makes financial sense. To your question of, should we be spending money advocating for it? I think that's a great question. And this has been a tough one. Last year, I voted no on that. I said, I don't think we should spend money on advocacy. And the tough part is that the state of Alaska does not distinguish between providing information and advocating. They consider it one category. If you're going to provide information, they call it advocacy. And so last year we weren't able to provide any information about City Hall and why it was a good idea. The city, which was the organization most knowledgeable about City Hall, couldn't provide that information. And so this year I said, okay, we have to mark this money as advocacy, even though we're just providing information. Then I'm willing to do that so that people have the facts that they didn't have last year. And I think one other common misconception about that money is that it's not $50,000 of new money. It's staff time. It's money that's already being spent. It's just got a special tag on it that says we're providing information to the community about this issue. So I understand why people feel like that was a breach of trust, because it's an awkward thing to do, but I didn't really see another way around it.
We're actually going to keep going on the hard topics because we're going to go into property taxes next.
Oh, I'm used to it. Keep going.
All right. Some 400 homeowners appealed their property assessments this year. Talk to us about property taxes and where you stand on that.
Yeah. Well, first let me say that I know people are feeling strapped right now. My monthly housing payments went up this year too, like most people in Juneau, and that's really not easy. My approach to managing the budget has been, first figure out what our community needs are. What are the core services that we need to do? And then, so I'm thinking about things like retaining our people, making sure we don't have so many vacancies in the city, maintaining our buildings, and then make sure we have the revenue to afford those expenses. Unfortunately this year, those expenses went way up. We just talked about it. Wages, we have to, pay people more. Supplies, building supplies are really expensive. And so the good news is that despite the challenges, our economy is continuing to grow. And so that allowed us to, reduce the rate at which we tax people. I know that's not enough for people because they their taxes still went up because the value of their property went up. But for me, I think what we can do better is continue to focus on growing the economy so that we can afford it even when expenses go up without raising property taxes. And I think we need to do a better job focusing on our needs rather than our wants. There were definitely some things this last year that the Assembly added to the budget that I didn't agree with. At the end of the day, I said we have to pay for those things that we just added to the budget, but I would like to see us be more disciplined in our spending if our goal is to decrease property taxes.
I call this the ambiguous question. If you could make on a promise to the voters that you swear not to break, what would it be?
Yeah, great question. My promise is that I am not going to shy away from hard things. I think that's easy to do. I think you can get away just kind of voting yes to the things that people want to do or just focus on kind of normal run-of-the-mill city business. But I think what I have shown in my record and I want to continue to do is like, let's tackle housing. It's not easy. Let's tackle the budget. That's not easy. But I'm not going to just vote yes or no because that's the simple way. I'm going to work on solutions that actually solve those problems. And I'm going to do that with people that maybe I don't agree with, because that's the only way to actually fix those issues.
So we're going to open up to any final statements that you would like to provide.
I just want to thank you for giving me this platform. And, I think as people are considering their vote coming up soon, I am bring that experience of serving on the Assembly, understanding some of these issues that we've been working on, get some ideas on how to fix them. But I know we've got work to do. I know there are things that people aren't happy about in terms of what the city's been doing on the campaign trail. I've been hearing about them. And so I feel like I feel it even more viscerally than I did before. And so just to say that, like, I'm listening, I'm open to new ideas. I want people to feel trust in their government. And that is kind of a core value for me. The other thing I'll say is just to remind people should be getting their ballots in the mail. I think as early as Friday or Saturday is likely, can't really predict the mail, but soon, this next week. And there are several ways that people can vote. So they can take that ballot and put it right back and, vote and then send it in. There are drop boxes in a variety of places around town that they can secure drop boxes that they can put them in. And then there are vote centers that they can go in and they can vote there like you would during a normal election. They can do that for the next 3 weeks, or they can wait till election day on October 3rd and go vote the way they used to vote in person. So
no excuses. That means you can vote, and it is our civic duty, Juneau, to vote. So let's see those numbers go up.
All right. Thank you, Alex.
All right. Thanks so much.